the earlier you can start to save something, and then to see that growth on that, even if it's a small amount of money every single month, for someone of my age now to start, I've got to be putting in big lumps of money to try and do the same thing that you could do with a very small sum of money now, that's I think a really big takeaway piece of advice for younger people, I think.
If I invested something and maybe it yields like 25, 30 pounds more, that's still a nice bag. I deserve something nice. So it's like, how do I find the balance between
have some sort of financial asset, but
right?
well, I can see you probably have some sort of asset somewhere. So, yeah.
You will have after these conversations. Yeah.
There you go.
Hi, and welcome to Legally Attuned Podcast from Attwells Solicitors, where we have legal conversations in plain English. Today we have Nick Attwell, our founder and CEO, and Steve Buckle, a chartered financial planner from Ashworth Planning. Today we will be talking about the financial forecast for 2026. Steve and Nick will both be discussing business and personal wealth, as well as the 2026 budget, and also diving into the financial forecast for what businesses and individuals should be thinking about, what's changing, and what opportunities might be coming their way. Steve and Nick, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we begin, for our viewers and listeners, Steve, could you briefly tell us what your line of work is and how you help people?
Sure, yeah. So Steve Buckle, I'm chartered financial planner at Ashworth Financial Planning. It's independent financial advice fundamentally, but we kind of take a step forward before we go into actual advice and really helping our clients create a financial structure that supports the life they want to live. There's a few things we have to unpack and understand to achieve that, but that's our starting point.
All right, thank you so much. And let's just get right into it. When you look ahead into 26, what do you think the big story is financially and what is shaping the landscape right now?
Sure, the big story remains really the budget and not just the most recent one, the one from the previous year as well. There's still the implication of that on various aspects of personal wealth in businesses is still finding their way through. Some of the things that were introduced or were first mentioned a year ago are yet to be introduced. And there's more that's coming in the most recent budget that will come in the next few years. So there's lots to consider.
And Nick, from the legal side, how was your reaction to the 2026 budget?
I think, like a lot of people, initially sort of a little bit relieved because the expectation was it was going to be potentially a lot worse than it actually turned out, initially to be. And as Steve mentions, a lot of things have been pushed back as well, so we may not feel them immediately. So I think ultimately it was just immediately was sort of a sense of relief. But again, like Steve, I would also put it together with the previous budget as well, which certainly from a business point of view, particularly around sort of national insurance rises, certainly has had an impact upon business owners and decisions to take on, more employees, etc. So yeah.
Should business owners or clients be more cautious or optimistic for 2026?
What do you think, Steve?
Well, it's hard to say, isn't it? I think there's an element of just what is your own, we all have our own personalities. Some of us are naturally more optimistic or regardless of what's happening. So I don't think there's anything specific in the budget that can dampen that. If you have that within yourself, you'll still have it. But it's not easy though, is it? It's harder than ever to run a business.
Yeah, and I think the concern I see is like this rising costs issue. Like, a lot of this is doing just sort of baking in more and more cost at every point, and sort of this inflationary pressure, which then will come with higher wage rises, and so it goes on, and someone's got to pay all of that bill, at the end of it all. And I think that's a concern that I have around it. But personally, we're just pushing on. Really, I think it's there's nothing in that's changed, made us change course as such, and we just feel, well, if in our little bit of the world it all looks okay, then on we go, and let's see how it goes.
And what should business owners or businesses be focusing on? Should it be growth or just coasting, or maybe making some more investments?
Yeah, so that's it depends on the type of business, I suppose, but all those things are potentially relevant. I think Nick just alluded to it perfectly, is that you focus on the things that you can control. There's a whole world around us of stuff that happens in life and in business, and most of them you just have to respond to it. You have to adapt to what's going on. But the things that you can control, i.e. the service you deliver, you can constantly gain feedback from your customers and your clients as to whether that's meeting what they expect. And we'll focus on that area then.
And Nick, as a business owner, what do you think 2026 will look like for you?
I think it's, I mean, I think it's going to continue, hopefully, business as usual. We've seen some good growth and hopefully we continue on in the same vein. I mean, a big thing that was good for us and good for other businesses as well was we were concerned about what was happening at the apprenticeship level and whether the government was going to sort of take away some of that funding. And that looks like that's staying, which is a big part of our sort of people plan for the future. And that's one of the challenges for businesses, like, how do you recruit, how do you grow? And that's, that was a sort of positive message that came out of the budget for us. And so, I think looking forward, I don't see that anything's going to change significantly from the previous year. And therefore, with that in mind, if we've had a good previous year, we should look forward relatively optimistically to the future, I think.
Yeah, sure you could. And Steve, if you were to sit down with a business owner or potential business owner in 2026, what would be the first thing you'd ask them to consider?
Yeah, from my point of view, it'd be trying to understand what the business is there for. What are they trying to achieve? What role does it play in their life? And that would indicate and direct what they then need to do over the coming year. We think of it in terms of, how does that business deliver money for their lifestyle now? Do they need to be setting aside money for the future? We're thinking of it on those lines.
Okay. And from a more personal perspective, how do you have conversations with people that might not really know what they want for 2026? Not particularly business owners, but someone that wants to plan what their life will look like in 2026. How would that look like?
Yeah, that's quite an interesting part of our service. So yes, we provide advice around what people do with their money, but really we need to understand where they are in their life and what they're trying to achieve before we can then deliver advice that's meaningful. And there's multiple ways that we can structure money, but that first point is really understanding kind of where they're at and where they're heading. There's a couple of ways that we do that. One is understanding the client's values. So that's separate to any particular goal they might have, but it's really important. We all have them, and we ask a simple question, which is, what's important about money to you? And that can invoke a series of responses. Sometimes we get the answer will be, say, security or freedom or something like that. And then I tend to delve a little bit deeper there because there's usually something behind that. So if someone says security is important to them, I'll say, what's important about security to you? And then we'll get another story sometimes about a childhood event or something, so they can't have any money or something. So you really get to understand. I had a client recently who freedom was so important than freedom. So I want to understand that in a bit more detail.
I mean,
And it was around something had happened. Their father had died at a relatively young age, and they wanted to make sure they had freedom to live their lives and not worry about
I'm relatively young. So at what age do you think someone should start considering financial planning? A lot of anxiety comes from making money, but not using the money to invest in your future. I started working recently, and I think what I'm anxious about is how do I use what I have to get more? How do I not just saving, but also, what you said about determining what is important to you. Time or money is one of the most expensive things that we have in life as you grow older, and more people want to feel like they have limited time and they want to stretch that money alone to, I don't know what's the retirement age right now? Sorry.
Well, the retirement age is whenever you're financially able to.
Oh,
State pension age is 67.
okay. So if you were talking to someone that was my age, what would you tell them?
I would make it abundantly clear that you have the most greatest resource on your side, which is time. So a relatively small amount invested on a regular basis at a young age can end up being a phenomenally significant sum 20, 30 years down the road. So,
I can just to chip in, because so Steve's my financial planner, and I think and that conversation about where you are in life and what you're trying to achieve is a really important one to understand, because everyone's therefore journeys and things are very different. But I think that one piece of advice of sort of the earlier you can start to save something, and then to see that growth on that, even if it's a small amount of money every single month, for someone of my age now to start, I've got to be putting in big lumps of money to try and do the same thing that you could do with a very small sum of money now, that's I think a really big takeaway piece of advice for younger people. I think
It is a challenge though for younger people because it's easy for me to say float and plan forward 20, 30 years, but you might be trying to buy a house, you might be your gyms and traveling a bit and so on. Yeah, so all these things come at the same time. But if you can just eke out a little bit every month, you'll be very glad that you did.
And the other thing that Steve has helped me with as well is first of all to just sort of take that little bit of money out before you really know it's in your your net income. So if that pops out immediately at the beginning of the month, whether it's £20, £50, doesn't matter what it is, it just comes out at the beginning of the month. You're not then using that as part of your monthly spend, and it's sort of taken care of, and then you're not even looking at it as part of your spend, which is helpful. You're working on sort of the reduced amount of money, but you're secretly squibbling some money away and hopefully growing that over the longer term.
And what is the difference between saving and investment for a personal point of view? Like some people might be saving money, but they don't know that the money you're saving might be helping them build something bigger. So is there any difference that you let us talk about?
Yeah, of course, there's a clear distinction. Savings tend to be cash deposits, which will sit in a bank account somewhere earning whatever interest that they earn, so probably 3.5% at the moment. Investing is much more long-term, where yes, you'll generate a much greater return, but investing, the returns are less predictable. So you'll have the ups and downs of your investment markets in the short term. So savings are really there for something that you might need in the next year or two. Anything beyond that, though, encourage investing because it will infinitely generate more. I mean, savings over the long run, you end up with less and less because, as we've all seen, particularly the last few years, inflation is just eating away at the true spending power of that money. So if you put 10 grand in a savings account, yes, you might still have 10 grand.
They'll come by what 10 grand.
Yeah, exactly. What you can buy with it is much less. So we've gone backwards without realizing it.
Sure.
So
Yeah. And Nick, what trends are you seeing in commercial law right now? And is there anything business owners should be prepared for in 2026?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing is on the employment side. So there's been a lot of sort of legislations on its way in. There's been some changes around unfair dismissal periods and things like that. So there's quite a bit of movement around that area, and the government sort of stepping back a little bit from where they originally said they were going to be, which is sort of almost to give a sort of day one ability to claim unfair dismissal, which would probably have ended up with people taking less and less employees on. So I think that's probably a useful step forward. So the employment legislation is something to watch because there's been quite a lot of change around that in 2026. I mean, otherwise, sort of, it's sort of, a lot of the usual sort of things that, I just always recommend, making sure that you've got a shareholders agreement in place if you're setting up a business with somebody else. Again, if you're under a bit of pressure as a business, and you start to have a sort of fallout with other partners and things like that, you need a document to be able to go to and to be able to sort of be able to resolve those sort of differences and disputes and things. So that's always a great piece of advice as well.
And Steve, is that something you also discuss with your clients?
that's not something that really falls within our leave side too. So.
Before we continue, is there any piece of advice you want to give to SMEs listening right now?
Can we go first? Okay. I mean, I think to always keep moving forward. I think I would always say that it's better to make a decision than to just be stuck there not able, sort of almost sort of preventive making a decision from inertia or just constantly thinking about all the different options. So just be bold, take step forwards, even if they're not necessarily the right step forward, they'll probably take you in the general right direction. So if you've got a fairly clear vision, just keep moving forward, with that. And I think, and don't be sort of put off by too much of the sort of big picture, scary stuff. When it comes down, what's going on a sort of macro level will affect you only in a fairly small way, probably, at your local level. So as Steve said earlier, to concentrate on those things that you can control and to identify what are your particular strengths as a business, and then to be bold with that and move forward with that would be my sort of general advice.
So you're a business owner yourself. Is there anything you could add to that?
Yeah, I think just anything I'd add is just think about what you want to measure. So if there's any kind of key metrics, maybe it's number of new inquiries, number of new clients, depends what kind of business it is, of course. But focus on a few simple metrics that you can easily measure, and then month after month after month, you can track the progress and so on. It tends to lead with an outcome.
Okay, and now we're going to segue into the question and answer segment. I'm just going to ask them a couple of questions, or one question from our viewers. Steve and Nick, it says, "Hi, Legally Attuned team. I'm a small business owner and I'm struggling with a tough decision. I've been paying myself way below market rate to keep my business afloat, but my employees recently found out and started questioning their own pay. Some clients are also worried about the business's stability. I feel like I deserve to pay myself fairly, but if I do, it might reduce cash reserves and risk future investments. Am I wrong for wanting to pay myself what I deserve, even if it might affect my business short term?"
I mean, I'll kick it off if you like. I mean, I think first of all, I'd always say, like, cash in any business is king. So yeah, that is the most important thing, is that you've got strong cash flow. If you haven't got strong cash flow in your business, then you're not paying anybody, whether they're employees or yourself. So I think, if any of these decisions are going to effectively mean that, you can't pay your bills or whatever, then you've got to think twice, about those. Having got the cash element right, then I think, you've got to value yourself properly, because if at the end of the day you're going into work each day and you're feeling demotivated because you're not paying yourself appropriately, that's not right, and it won't lead to good decisions, and it won't sort of encourage you to want to get up in the morning and push that business forward. So
Yeah, absolutely. I agree completely. If you're the business owner, you should be paying yourself what you're worth as a business owner, but you should also be rewarded for the risk that you're taking in starting and building a business in the first place. With the caveat that you don't ruin the cash reserve. Of course, you have to find that balance. And it could be as simple as, are you charging enough for whatever it is you're doing? So the products be more expensive, the revenue to work, see what the market will tell you if it's too expensive. But I think ultimately, yeah, you should be being paid.
Yeah, because some businesses tend to put anything that they make, business owners, any amount they make back into the business because they feel like it's more of like a short-term thing. I'm making this much money now, yes, but what if I put what I'm already earning back into the business? But at the same time, it's trying to find the balance between, am I growing my business and not helping myself? At the end of the day, you're making money to help yourself and your family and your personal growth. So yeah, I think finding the balance would be very.
yeah, I mean, I had some periods sort of early on, when we went through the 2008 recession and things, and there were periods there where, what I was taking out of the business was zero or significantly less than, some of the lowest paid people who worked for me. And you just got to accept that that is a short-term situation. And that's the other side of running a business. And that's what Steve said. That is, why you've also, it's not just value what you do day to day, but also the investment you're making. Yeah. That's the risk, you're putting your money at risk. And so, when that changes back round again, you equally shouldn't feel bad of, well, hang on a minute, we're doing a bit better now, because, that's part of the risk of the money in. So, there are periods, like that you maybe go through as a business when you're not earning what you'd like to earn out of it. But ultimately, you want to try and get it into a situation where it makes sense for you, as well, because I think that will help to make good decisions, and also will help, to incentivize your employees and everybody else to look forward and look upwards in relation to the business.
Okay, and now we're going to be down to the individual level, Steve. Everyday people, what should they be doing in 2026 to set themselves up?
Yeah. So I think I don't know if this is unique to 2026. I don't know, but it's a habit of I think would be worthwhile in any year. It's a concept of lifestyle creep. So if for whatever reason you get a slight pay increase of an extra, let's say £100 a month, what most people tend to do is just absorb that into their income and end up spending that extra £100 a month on things and like other stuff. And that's lifestyle creep. So your lifestyle creeps up as your increase creeps up. But Nick alluded to it earlier. If you sort of pay yourself first, I set up that regular investment plan. So the money goes, get a pay rise, send it straight into an investment, or half of it to an investment, and enjoy the rest.
I mean, so some people have the mindset of, if I make more, I should do more for myself. And I think that happens when you get like maybe a pay increase, or if I invested something and maybe it yields like 25, 30 pounds more. That's still a nice bag. I deserve something nice. So it's like, how do I find the balance between having to tell myself I need to look into the future?
Yeah.
What would life look like if I put this money into it?
Yeah, I think it's useful to understand. Easy for me to say investing extra money. I know exactly what that would mean, but it's hard to say unless you really understand what that means. I think the way we help clients do that is understanding the cost of their lifestyle. So what is the cost of their lifestyle now, and what might that be in the future? If we can identify that we're saving, investing enough for that, then you can enjoy today a bit more because you know the future is covered. So there's a balance, there's a chance. We don't know what the future.
What does balance look like to you?
Yeah, I think it is difficult, and I think when you work very hard, you do feel, well, hang on a minute, I should treat myself to things too, particularly when times are better. But I think you've got to try and be as disciplined as you can, because I do think otherwise there is a danger that you just Steve says, your lifestyle just keeps on creeping up, and you just and you spend on stuff that you don't really need, and so I think that's again about understanding who you really are, and not just try to get the next thing because your friend's got one or whatever it may be. So I think sort of being sort of true to yourself and to your values and to who you really are, and I don't think there's anything wrong with doing a little treat every every now and again, and I think that's good and that keeps you motivated, and and there's nothing wrong with that. But I agree. I think those sort of putting a bit away, working out what that looks like, and I think also what Steve does quite well is he can show you, for example, if you put £100 away a month, whatever the number is, what that can look like if over the long term. And when you actually see what that looks like, you're like, hang on a minute, this is actually really significant.
That's a Steve.
Yeah.
Some months I do give myself a treat, but I pay for it the next month anyway. It's like, I don't even know. Okay. And from me, someone like me, what is one habit you think I should pick up next year?
Okay,
Put me.
for you, track your expenditure. It's dull and boring, but it makes a world of difference. Understand where the money goes each month.
Okay. Shouldn't go to my cards. So I'm hearing. And Nick, from a legal perspective, what are the essentials that people seem to forget? Is the will, structuring assets, property consideration?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is often the will that people don't think about, or they think about, I only should do a will when I'm really old, or or like I've got to have loads of money, or I've got to have children, or wherever it may be. So I think people sort of mistake a will with being something that you do when you're later on in life. But I think as soon as you're sort of starting to take making any sort of serious financial decisions, or indeed personal decisions around family or anything like that, will plays a very important role. So you don't want to go to all this trouble of stuff that we've been talking about for it all to end up not in the right places that you wanted it to end up in. And also there's just a very personal side to it. There may be personal things you want to say in your will, or personal items you want to leave to people, that's important too. And then I think not also to forget like the one step before that, which is for most people, there's also sort of some degree of loss of capacity, whether that be physical or mental, before they pass away, and that's where the power of attorney comes in. And one of the sort of bad stories that we hear about, people who sort of contact us saying their relative has lost their sort of capacity, and now what do I do? And they need help, they need care, they need money spent. The actual relatives got all this money, but they haven't set up a power of attorney. Then the individual's having to pay out their own bank account, which can put them into very difficult financial situations in the short term. And just sort of thinking about some of these steps. It's not just about yourself, but it's also about sort of setting up for your family, and as well.
We see that a lot when we take on a new client. We'll always try to get a copy of that will if we can, to understand. If there isn't a will, then of course we send them on to.
Is there like an age you would advise anyone to start in her working with?
I think the younger the better in a way, but particularly if you then start to have some sort of financial asset.
Nice.
I see you probably have some sort of asset somewhere. Yeah.
You will have after these conversations. Yeah.
There you go.
All right, Steve. Would you advise paying off your mortgage early or using it to invest?
Okay, so that's an interesting question. question. I do get that a lot from clients. There's kind of two elements to the answer, because there's an emotional side and a logical side. The logical side is invest, because typically the investment return will be greater than the interest rate on the mortgage. So if your interest from the mortgage is, say, 3.5%, 4% or thereabouts at the moment, but your long-term investment return, if you've done it sensibly, should be around 7% a year on average. So the difference between the two, that's what you get to keep. So the logical answer is yes, invest. But the emotional side to it is there's a lot of peace of mind, a lot of unquantifiable value that comes from living in a house that you own without any debt. And we respond to that differently as human beings. Not everybody feels the same about that. So I've got clients who don't care, that they're into their 60s and still have a mortgage and just pay it off, still pay it off gradually. But got others who are determined to pay it off as quickly as possible and don't regret doing that. So there is a kind of an emotional side to it, but logically, invest.
And it's quite useful to actually see that, to see the difference in the figures, because, a lot of what your parents say to you is, just get your mortgage paid off as quickly as you possibly can. That sort of like saves you advice as such. But until you actually look at the maths with someone like Steve and say, well, what could you get if you invested that money compared to, what are you actually saving by paying off the mortgage? And you look at the difference in those numbers. That's when sort of the logic can help you to actually make what might be the sort of right decision.
Some people might think if I pay my mortgage off early, I could always invest after. But then when you think the money you could have invested in the beginning could have yielded even more. So
that's true. It's the compounding of returns, that really the compounding takes a while to really have an impact. But after 10, 15, 20 years, the assets just grow and grow and grow. That difference that Nick just alluded to can be hundreds of thousands of extra money through investing rather than overpaying. Not for everyone. Not everyone will want to do that, but logically that's the lesson.
And there has been some changes to inheritance tax in the 2026 budget, and I don't really know much about that. Could you explain on that?
Oh, okay. So there was quite a significant change. Not the most recent budget, the one before, around inheritance tax on pension funds was the big change. So the last 10, 15 years, there's been no death benefit charge on a pension fund. So you could accumulate pension, receive tax relief on every contribution, tax-free growth for multiple decades. And then at the end of your life, it would pass down to your children or grandchildren, or whoever you wanted to benefit from it, entirely tax-free. So it's a wonderful vehicle for estate planning, really, rather than it was originally intended. So it's not a huge surprise that it's now come into the estate, or is to be come into the estate in April 2027. But the manner in which it's coming in is quite brutal. So the general rule of thumb that I had with many clients was, if you could live your lifestyle and enjoy everything you wanted to do without spending your pension fund, let's say you had other investments you could use, and then that was a great thing to do. You could leave it alone, and that general rule of thumb would apply. It would trickle down to your children, grandchildren, free of tax. That general rule of thumb just doesn't exist anymore now, because we know the pension's now in the estate, so 40% inheritance tax. And if you pass away over 75, the recipient of the pension then pays income tax on the same money that's just paid inheritance tax. So a complete sea change really in the rules. So we have to now put in plans to navigate that, and it's difficult and different for different clients. Depending on their individual circumstances, we might want to trickle money out gradually and gift it to children and grandchildren, or we might want to spend the pension and preserve other investments instead. Where sometimes we'll liaise with Nick or his colleagues around setting up trust arrangements, because that can help protect inheritance tax as well. So it's a quite straightforward general rule of thumb. Just take it away. So quite sensitive.
Yeah, I don't think I can add much to this. Aside to sort of say, sit down and talk about it with someone like Steve. That's the most important thing, and be aware of it, because that is a big change. It's a huge change for people. So just go and talk to someone about it.
You said something about you upload the trust. Is there?
Yeah, I mean, trust isn't my particular area, but yes, there may be something that you could do around sort of, putting your assets, into a trust for beneficiaries, later down, in your, later in life. But it's not really my area of expertise. So.
No, and the will comes into that again, as we
that's
really having the will set up properly, because they just changed it in the last budget, but there was on agricultural land's the other bit that's been brought into the estate. There's a £1 million allowance that husband and wife each have. If the will wasn't set up properly, there was only one of those allowances on the second death, rather than the allowance following over. They have now amended that in the most recent budget. But it's having the will set up properly is crucial for all these kind of things.
And that will be all for today. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Legally Attuned Podcast. If you did enjoy this conversation, please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and tell a friend to tell a friend. Thank you.